Okay, I think we're almost, yes. I think we're going to the board, no, to the superintendent's report. She has a lot to report on.
And such a lovely place to be between you and board elections, or between this and board elections. Okay, so I'll zip through this pretty quickly. And what do we have time constraints?
Well, just, but it's fine. It's 3:30. It's fine.
Okay, all right.
He just said he'd move it, but then he's not in here, so it's good.
Okay. So just come up. All right. So I thought I would just share with you sort of a summary of the road trip, and I so appreciate those board members who have been with me this year. Board Member Hanson, Board Member Lear, and Board Member Huntsman were able to attend some of these visits with me, and it's always really nice to have you there. And that's not to disparage those of you who couldn't make it, but I hope that you all will listen to some of the things that we learned and either reach out to your own LEA or others that you might be interested in. So in terms of a few things I just want to highlight in some of the LEAs, we've talked a lot with people out in the field about as we talk about today's economy and skills for student success, we could have a laundry list, but here are some things that seem to pop out that are helping students be more successful. And you've heard me talk about these before, so I won't go through the list, but I personally added empathy at the bottom of this list. There's seems to be some really interesting studies around engaging students in the work of empathy, and I saw some of this out in schools where it's making a difference. And you could label it a lot of different ways. You could call it kindness or understanding. It's labeled empathy in some of the education circles. But I think these are some skills that seem to be, if we focus on these things, that it really helps our students transition to that next phase. And I saw these in all of the places that I stopped. So remember, this is sort of part two. I reported on earlier trips, but I'm just going to highlight the last four that we were able to get to. So in Millard School District, I took a beautiful drive on a very early morning with the sun rising over the hills to Delta, Utah. And Chair Huntsman met me there. And, you know, when we talk about rural areas and thinking about what do they have access to, I was amazed at what they have access to in Delta. Really, in the Millard School District, great use of technology and real appropriate use of technology. It wasn't so much about every student having a device, it was how the teacher was using it or how students were using it to access various courses. So, for example, if you look in a little square with a screen there, you will see that there were, at any given point, we saw about 12 students in a classroom where they were meeting with 10 other classes and being able to access 12 different concurrent enrollment courses in one small high school. And that's very impressive. They had a really robust theater, music, and art program all throughout the district. There were high levels of community members coming in and finding ways to engage. In fact, in one setting on the left, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a business that's about 20 to 30 miles away, and their employer allows them to have an extra 30 minutes of lunch where they Skype. They're assigned a student, and they Skype with the student and tutor them in reading. So the tutor has the book, the student has the same book, and they've been highly trained and vetted in how to work with these students. So it provides a way for community members to work with a student where they physically may not be able to come to the school just based on geography. And then when I talk about being focused on the whole child, you can really tell this culture and climate and getting students what they need. In fact, I love that the principal at Delta High, I asked her what her most important thing she felt that she had in the school, and she showed me a secret closet of prom dresses that she shares with students, which I loved. She calls it her princess closet. But they're really working on how to recruit and retain teachers that are from Millard and coming back to the district. And they have a physics teacher who I believe he had like 3 sections of physics that were packed with kids. And he was a local young man who went into teaching and came back, and such a great teacher that a lot of students are really now getting exposure to physics through this teacher. Moving on to Sevier, they really have put emphasis on career and technical education, and they built this wonderful CTE center, and I think they offer about 18 different pathways that are really, really interesting and connected to industry. So you might see some real traditional CTE pathways, but they're doing some really innovative things as well. And when you go into their schools, their junior highs and elementaries, you see pennants of all of these different colleges as well as local colleges, and really helping rural students understand that there are a lot of possibilities for them. And they have really focused on kindness and empathy. And you can see that replete based on the way that students treat each other. I stood at a high school kind of up on this deck and looked down at their lunch period and watched students reach out to kids that were eating alone. And just watching them interact was really compelling to see how this is playing out in the classroom. And they've really focused on their school leaders. In Iron District, I think they've really taken to heart personalized learning. And the things that I want to highlight here, specifically, I would encourage you, if you ever hear in any of your schools about flex time and whether it's working or not, Canyon View High has one of the best flex time models I've ever seen. And they really are targeting each and every student with personalized learning. The students are really articulate about it. They can tell you how it's really improving outcomes for them. And the Potters, for example, I walked in on a pottery class at Flex Time, and these kids were either catching up or accelerating some projects, but they had been tagged by their teacher to come in and work on this project during a certain time. But it's a really unique and positive thing. And then for privacy, I wanted to point out, you can see these tiles in the one corner. This is an engineering class where the teacher can see what's on every student's computer screen. He has a program to do that. And students would look up there and say, oh, you know what, I tackled that problem. So they would walk over and help their peer. But everybody was really aware that it's a safety measure, but also one of being able to help each other in this classroom. And I was really compelled by that. But Iron is really focused on culture and climate and high expectations for students. And you could just see the messaging everywhere. It was really profound. They also, at their middle school, which is jam-packed with kids at Cedar Middle, they were really having problems with discipline and acting out behavior and a lot of mental health issues. So they've really focused on trauma-informed practice and have been trained, and their counselors, for example, are in the lunchroom at lunch. All of their school counselors stand right in there, and you see kids hovering around them. And the principal was able to show me all of her discipline data, how it had really been diminished by these strategic things that they were working on. In Davis School District, their foundation is really robust. If you know anything about the Davis Foundation, they provide a lot of additional resources for schools, and they're working on developing their own teachers. So anybody that's on an ARL or an APT pathway, they have courses that they're providing them with, and really supporting developing their own teachers and growing their own teachers as well. We did get to tour the food services building, and if you've never been to the Davis Foods, I would call it the compound. It's immense, and it's really overwhelming, and a lot of our districts actually save money by purchasing from their food service program, and they really take the feeding of children to heart as key to helping them gain academic rewards, academic improvement. And they've really been very locally focused on aligning all of their curriculum and standards and assessments. And then their new schools are really focused on tech, but it's very learning focused. So we went to a brand new school where they had live feed, for example, in monitors from the San Diego Zoo and other places where the kids could see it in real time, and there was a lot of robotics and other things going on. I actually was working with the kids. I had my own Google glasses on, and that was a literacy discussion. And the students would look in the Google Glass and then respond to some questions. Very interesting. Salt Lake District is so clearly focused on individual student needs, and our own board member Lear works in the food pantry that you see in one of those tiles. You serve there on Wednesdays, I think you said that. And I will tell you that while they have a lot of amazing programs, and the schools are seen as the center of community, they're doing a lot of things like organized recess and a lot of these kinds of things. But what I was so impressed with was the best examples of Tier 1 instruction that I think I've ever seen in some of our most highly impacted schools in Salt Lake District. Just phenomenal, phenomenal instruction by the teacher. And oftentimes they were using digital tools, but really incredible instruction that was improving outcomes for students. I forgot to bring in my visual aid, but when we were at Highland, these two young men with their phenomenal teacher, their welding teacher, she has 240 students in her program, and these students made me a rose, and it's pretty sharp and thorny, and I think I poked myself and I said, wow, this is like a real rose. And the student that you see there on the left said, well, of course, it's legit. And so I have a legit metal rose in my office that I want to share with you at some point. It's very, very cool. And then last but not least, GUAB District. I know you're getting nervous, sir. I'm sorry. GUAB School District, watching the clock. You're trying to move things along. I get it.
Sorry.
So GUAB School District, you've heard a lot about them as they're looked at as a national leader in personalized learning. Some call it competency-based. They would tell you they're not there yet, but they definitely are engaged in personalized learning. And I have never seen a culture of feedback like this district. The students and the adults in the system are so used to giving and receiving feedback that it permeates the culture. And there were classrooms that we walked in where the teacher was truly the facilitator. The students were teaching the class, and kids were unabashed about, very appropriately, giving them feedback, asking questions, and students were really engaged in either working together in pairs or in small groups or in large group. And the culture that has set forth in that district is so impressive with feedback. When we talk about House Bill 239, and I know a lot of you have heard from your districts about how overwhelmed they are by restorative justice and the lack of resources that they have, this is a really good example of where it's working well, because they have this interagency council that meets together. And so it's their police force, Department of Workforce Services, Department of Human Services, their medical profession, a lot of people meeting together, and they're talking about families and students and how they can support them. And they have really high levels of feedback to the point where I think they added 2,500 students, Linda, this year. Is that correct? With families moving in part to get out of some inversion, but also because they're hearing about this great district and want their kids to be involved. So my overall impressions, I'm just going to pop these 6 things out. This is inclusive of all of the districts that I've visited this year, including charters as well. Systems who are focused really on well-being and educational equity as part of their overall improvement strategies are really getting positive academic outcomes for students. So sometimes we have this debate about, should we only focus on academics? But I will tell you, more often than not, when we were in schools and systems and they were showing us how they were supporting students with all of these other services, they were getting the academic outcomes. So if we know anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when you meet those, students can learn. And that was really important to see firsthand. Also, those systems who are focused on career and technical education as a viable part of their offerings and are really intentional about it and connecting with industry, they are keeping kids not only engaged, but giving kids hope for their future, that they are walking away with the ability to be employed and then moving into higher education as well. First and foremost, nothing can take the place of effective instruction by the teacher. We saw that time and time again for the board members that are with me. When you saw that incredible instruction in the classroom, it didn't matter what technology they had or what programs of support that they had. That really was key, and we saw so much great instruction. And those same systems that are holding their students and teachers to high standards and high expectations, students will rise to the occasion. And oftentimes we tend to lower the ceiling based on pressure that we feel from all sorts of places, but those high expectations are really playing out in outcomes. Another impressive thing that I think we really need to continue to attend to, and that's the way we engage parents. Those systems who are engaging parents as legit thought partners, and not just as an afterthought, but they're upfront working together on behalf of students, it really improves conditions for learning. And last but not least, school leaders matter. In every effective system that we walked into, in every effective school, there was an incredible school leader really focused on the right things. And I can tell you that so many great things are happening across the state. The challenge is we don't tell our stories well. So many times we would walk into a place and we would say, do you know this? Do other people know about this in your system? And the response was, well, it's just the way we do things. So it leads to some of the next requests of the board. This is my last slide, I promise. Here are the things that we were asked as we were out and about. And some of these things I heard last year as well in the 10 different districts that I visited and charters. So one of the requests is to continue to provide quality professional learning. The example that they often gave is the assess to achieve, or you know it as A to A. And this comes from our assessment department. The prior board voted to end this program and ending it with the 2018 funding that ends in June. But we have a cohort 2 that really should carry on with this. So that's a request they've made of you all. Another thing that I just framed it as asking why, and somebody actually used this vernacular, that they hope that we're asking why things are that we're doing things before moving to the what and how. And part of that is related to time and providing more time for teachers to implement. That's been addressed today. They also would like a repository, whether that's a website or somewhere of best practices. And we talk about it all the time and don't always move forward with that. But I think we've got some ideas about how to do that. They want model policies often. They talked about data privacy policies in some places. And then they want us to really focus on practices and policies that will help recruit and retain effective teachers. So kind of using that lens that when we're engaged in policy making, we stop to think about how does it not only impact the students, but the adults in the systems as well. So thank you for supporting my road trip. I know that it means that I'm out of the office on those occasions when I'm on the road, and I've tried to be really judicious about minimizing that time, but I will tell you that it pays back tenfold. Even today, I had a letter from a teacher whose students got to visit with us, and she talked to me about the impact that had on students to be able to converse with, in quotes, an important person. But I will tell you that being able to view what's going on and bring those stories back to you and out to the public, people really appreciate it, and they appreciate it when you as board members are in the schools. So thank you for supporting my efforts and for the many times that you're out in the schools and telling the stories of the people that you represent.
Board Member Hanson.
I just want to thank Sid for going out, Dr. Dixon. It's been so much fun to go out with you. And, you know, Sid gets right down there with the kids. She sat in a beanbag with a little boy down in Juab, and they just love her. And so I appreciate the chance to go out, and I appreciate the chance that you've taken the time to do it.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Reeby.
I have 2 questions. Did you get a picture of her getting out of that beanbag chair? Because that's my second. When you showed those tiles, that is called a program called Land School, and it's really cool. You can actually send websites out to the students. You can see what every kid is doing. You can send them to another website. You can block a site. You can ask them a question. You can take a survey. You can see every key that kid hits on that computer. You can see every site they've searched. You can go back for days. You can go back for months. And so that program right there is so amazing. When you're teaching school and you want the kids to look at you, you blank their screens, and collectively they all go, oh, and it just brings a smile to like every teacher. But it's amazing what we're doing to make sure our kids are safe. And that program is one of the programs that really has such a great impact on getting kids on the right place at the right time and keeping them on task. So when you show that, it's like, wow, the kids love to look at each other's work, and it's really, it's just exciting when something as mundane as that really, it sparks kids to like, where are they going? What are they doing? You know, so I really thank you for showing that.
Board Member Stoltz.
I think it's great you've been out and about, and mainly because I'd like you to go back to the Salt Lake slide, if you would. There's actually a person there in a Weber State sweatshirt. In Salt Lake County. So although we don't have big fans in Weber County, we clearly have one in Salt Lake County. So thanks for going out and doing that. Weber State, yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Got the welding mask on and they're in the center.
There you go.
She's an amazing teacher.
Well, I've got some comments on it too, but I'll wait till my comments later today to talk a little bit about the engagement that happens out in our education community by the superintendent and the example she sets. Okay.